Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to question the intentions of my colleague, Councillor King, but this is probably the single most dangerous item I've seen filed on this council floor. If we don't understand the Constitution, and if we haven't read it lately, we should have learned from the Panhandlers case that freedom of speech in this country is sacred. And what it appears as if there is an adversarial relationship here with one single counselor that's being cloaked in this discussion of civility, transparency, respect, decorum. It's all irrelevant. Freedom of speech trumps everything. And we've had discussions here about the Constitution and whether it applies on a local basis versus a federal basis with legislation, namely the Patriot Act, that eliminates a lot of our constitutional rights. And as politicians, and as somebody who served on this council since 1990, if you think this is adversarial on this floor, you haven't seen anything. I've seen real adversarial and combative behavior on the council floor that hasn't come close to anything I've seen in the last 10 years. And it comes down to the very basic fact that once elected to office or serving in a high public position, you are public property, and you're going to be a target. For God's sakes, I've been stalked by a political stalker for the last decade. What was I going to do? Leave because my feelings were hurt? Please, we have more important things to do on this council. The most important thing we have to do on this council is understand what the Constitution is. This country is identified by its Constitution. And its Constitution, by the way, is being ignored from the White House, a president who doesn't understand what executive orders are, to Supreme Court justice who started interfering in the national election. That's how little regard the Constitution has gotten from the top, now all the way down to the Worcester City Council. This kind of request, no matter what the city solicitor comes through, will not withstand any kind of legal scrutiny. We will be back in court, and I'll go to the ACLU myself to make sure we're back in court. We cannot tolerate, and we should not be offended by somebody's so-called bad behavior. That's part of life. You know what the most important weapon we have? The mayor's gavel. He didn't use it for 4 hours when the Ferguson group came in here and shouted the worst kind of language I've ever heard, accusing the police of crimes, of behavior that was illegal, hostile, negative, and by our own existence, our behavior. You know, when I hear about institutional racism and those kinds of issues, it's a blame issue. We are all to blame. And if we allow this kind of item, we are perpetuating blame and creating an environment that is not American, frankly. I mean, my parents were immigrants. We've heard that story. Councillor Bergman can give you the same story from oppressive countries that didn't allow freedom of the speech and freedom of the press. I take it very seriously. This item should be filed. It should go nowhere. I'm ashamed that it's here. And I don't want to start an adversarial relationship with another counselor, but very clearly, I have to use the strongest words possible to show my absolute fear of this kind of item. Without freedom of the press and freedom of speech, we are no better than a third-rate country that has no reason to exist. So my motion is to file this, Mr. Chairman.